In this lesson, we'll learn how we can start to bake out our substance textures that were set up in an earlier lesson, so that way we can actually start to render these inside of MetalRay. Okay, so in an earlier lesson, whenever Justin was going through the texturing portion of this mech character, we relied a lot on the substance textures to create a lot of the details. Now, the substance textures are really nice, but the problem is that they don't by default render inside of MetalRay. So what we're going to have to do is take the shading networks for these substance textures and actually bake those out so that way they can be compatible with MetalRay. So to do this, we're going to start by going to Window, Rendering Editor, and we're going to open up the Hypershade. Okay, so let's just sort of move some things around here and try to make some space for ourselves. So what we're going to try to do is basically identify these areas where we're going to be using these substance textures, and then we'll learn how to bake those out. So if I go over to my Textures tab, you can sort of get an idea of which of these sort of texture nodes are based on substances. So if I hover on those, you can see Diffuse Substance 1, Diffuse Substance 2, and so on and so forth. Now, the naming convention of those is different if you compared to something like a typical JPEG or a bitmap texture, which Justin also used. You can see these have the prefix file 1, file 10, file 11. So that tells us that these are basic bump maps, and that anything that has this substance prefix is essentially a substance texture, which again cannot be rendered inside of MetalRay. So this is a little bit easier way, or a fairly fast way, to come in and identify which of these textures are being used. So now we just need to find out which material or which shader these are hooked into. Now to do that, let's just select one of these substance textures, and let's click on this little button here, which will map the input and output connections. So click on that, and you can see now we can find this material, or this little node, which we had selected previously, and it will allow us to see now the material that was connected to, which is exactly what we want. So here we go. This is what we're actually looking for, this substance 1. And what we need to do now is basically take this material, or this texture, and bake it out. So if we come in here, we can once again map the input and output connections if we wanted to see all of the different connections for this. So the normal map, the diffuse, as well as the specular. So what we're going to do is look for the root node, the actual substance itself, and we should see all of its settings over here. And let's just try to move this over so we give ourselves a little bit more room, just because I am a little bit limited in screen space here. So with this substance selected, we're going to scroll down, and we're going to look for this option to export images to disk. So let's click on that. And it's going to ask us to now basically bake all these out into something that is going to be usable. So we're going to, let's say maybe just bake these out as JPEG images. Let's say I want each one of these to be 1024 by 1024, so that way I get a decent resolution of my images. And with this, I'm going to tell it to automatically create a new shader network based on these new maps that I bake out. This will make a little bit more sense here in just a minute. Now the thing that we need to do is actually define the path where these are going to be baked out. So what I typically like to do is to just bake these into something like the source images directory of my project. So I'll just go into the source images directory, and then I'll just take this path and copy that and then paste that back into Maya. So let's get to this little path here. Let's Control V to paste that. Now, here's something that is really important, critically important for you to do. Whenever you're baking this out, you want to make sure that you take any of these areas where you have a backspace or a backslash and change that to a /. So let's come in here, change that backslash to a /. There we go. And now I can just copy that, and I'll use this next time. So now let's export. Give this just a minute. And there we go. So now here is basically my new file texture. So you can see these are now JPEG images right down here. Excellent. So now what I need to do is essentially now swap out anything that's using this material with this one. So an easy way to do that is to come up here, right-click on your existing substance material, right-click, and let's select objects with material. There we go, and you can see that's actually all these different pieces of the arm. Now, with all of those selected, let's go down to our new shader network, right-click, and assign material to selection. There we go. So now, we've basically taken all of the objects that were using this material, we easily selected all of those, and now we've pointed them to use this material, which now this one should be able to be used and rendered inside of MentalRay. So let's see what we've done. Let's take this image, let's save that for comparison, let's do a quick render. Okay, and now you can see that our texture is back for the arms and for the legs. Now it's a little bit bright and a little bit overblown, but that's okay. We can always come back and start to fine-tune and adjust that a little bit more. But essentially now we've taken what was previously a substance shading network. We've now baked that down into basic JPEG images, which now MentalRay can read just fine. Okay, very nice. So once we've got that finished up, what we can do now is just simply get rid of all the unneeded nodes that we're no longer using anymore. So inside the Hypershade, just go to Edit and Delete Unused Nodes. And you can see that cleared out a handful of these nodes up here that are no longer visible. So let's repeat the process. So select my diffuse. Again, we can identify this as a substance texture just because of its little prefix, substance 2. With that selected, let's map the input and output connections. Perfect. Let's go to the substance node, which is right back here. We're going to export those images to a disk. You can see it still remembered the path that I used previously, so everything else should be good. Let's export. There we go, very nice. So now we have this new file texture set of images that's been baked out. Now we want to take this previously used substance. Once again, right-click, select any objects that were using this material. You can see that was part of the shoulders and part of the claws. Now with those selected, let's replace those with this new one. So right-click on this new material and assign to selection. There we go. Once again, delete unused nodes to clear out any unused substance. And there we go. So now we can come in here. Let's take a quick render. That should have been part of the shoulder area that we just now fixed up. And you can see now we're starting to get that back. So really it's just a matter of now repeating this process a couple more times. So we'll go back, once again, map the input and output connections so we can find this substance. Once again, export the images. Export. There we go. And it's going to be this one. Right-click, select objects with material. That looks like it's going to be the sort of ground opening. So now with that selected, right-click and assign to selection. Delete the unused nodes to get rid of any unused substance. There we go. And you can now actually see that there are no more nodes in here that have that substance prefix. Everything is back to file or file texture, which is exactly what we want. Very nice. So let's come in and take a quick render. And there we go. Very nice. So now we have our textures back. So nice textures now along the ground, along the body, and along all of these other parts where it was previously not visible. Now, like I said, everything is now a little bit bright and a little bit blown out, and that's perfectly fine. That just has to do really with the material that's being applied to these objects, and that's really easy to fix. So that'll be the focus for our next lesson, where we come in and start to fine-tune now some of the rendered material results for some of these objects that we've now repaired.